Right, it is officially time to start. It is 10:30 p.m. UK time. We are live from London, and just in case, because I know some people are still confused on whether they're watching live or they're watching on replay, if it is not the 22nd of December 2023, and if it is not 10:30 p.m. UK time, then you're probably watching a replay later on. So we are live from London. I'm just off Oxford Street here, and I'm Nathalie for the ones that don't know me. And let's go. Let me flip this camera around. So you've got the chat as usual. Feel free to use it. Feel free to ask me anything. So we'll have a little walk tonight in an area that probably quite a few of you know well. The 23rd. What did I say? 26th, I'm off, yeah. 25th and 26th, bank holiday, I'm off. Right, let's go. So we are on the Duke of Argyll Street here, and let me show you Little Argyll. So this is Little Argyll Street. So this is all named after the Duke of Argyll that used to have a mansion here in the 1700s. And in this little street here, there used to be a concert hall called the Argyll Rooms at the beginning of the 19th century. You know, it was the time with all those concert halls. The Argyll Rooms were often full of sex workers, really. And one night there was an interesting event. The opera room it's all gone now because of a fire in the 1830s. But before that, one night, a young girl was here with her boyfriend watching the show, and she had some kind of a fit, like physically looking like almost like an epileptic fit. And she was frozen, she couldn't speak. She had to be taken out of the room into a horse carriage and taken home. When she finally regained her full consciousness, and when she was able to speak to her boyfriend, she said to him that when she was in the audience, she had some kind of a vision. She spotted a naked man on the beach, fully naked, and his face was partially covered with some kind of fabric, and he had some kind of fabric tangled around his neck. And she recognized him. It was a friend of hers. So it must have been a friend she knew quite well to be able to recognize him naked with a piece of fabric on his head. But yeah, and her boyfriend was like, "Don't worry, darling, your friend is absolutely fine, don't worry." And finally they went to bed. The next day they read in the paper that friend of hers had drowned in a shipwreck in the Solent. His body was found on the beach next to Southampton. So that was a little premonition that happened here in the Argyll Rooms. Anyway, let me show you the beautiful Paladium Theatre. So beautiful venue. Well, I say that I've not actually been inside. I have to confess, I've never been to a show here. It is beautiful, and guess what? It is haunted. The story of the ghost here came out in the 70s when one of the security men was interviewed for a BBC show, and he claimed that they have a staircase at the back. Some claim that the staircase itself was not built with the theatre, but it was already there, that it used to belong to the house of the Duke of Argyll that stood there before. That, I don't know if that is true, but maybe. And apparently quite a few audience, actors, as well as security men have seen a ghost in that staircase. A lady wearing a crinoline dress. Now, we don't know who she was, but what we do know is quite a few people have claimed to have seen her. We have a few contendants, but one of them would be Miss Shyburn. She was the mistress of the Duke of Argyll. Who knows? Maybe. When I say the Duke of Argyll, by the way, I mean the Duke from the 1700s. Some of you might think of the BBC show that came out a couple of years ago. What was it called? Great British Scandal. That was also about the Duke of Argyll and his infamous divorce with the Duchess of Argyll. But that was in the 60s, so that's much more modern. You know, the show with Claire Foy, some of you might have seen it. So different Duke of Argyll. Welcome Tariq, and welcome everyone that just joined. And this is the famous Liberty.
It's this way, isn't it? Yeah.
Amazing department store. This part of the building, it's from the 1920s, but the shop itself, it's from late Victorian times. And it's a beautiful shop. It's meant to, it has been designed for you to almost feel like you're walking into somebody's living room, really. And it's a fancy shop, but it's not pretentious. You know, it's not like luxury. It's, you know, items for everyone, really. And it's although it's an old shop and a traditional shop, they often have some very new items and very unique items, because the gentleman that manages it now, it's a guy from America. He's really good at what he does, and every June, I think it is, every year they have an open house, and anyone, even if you're not known in fashion, or if you're not known in anything really, you can come and pitch your product, and whatever it might be, you know, something very new. The documentary I watched, for example, it was a young girl from East London. She had created a nail varnish that smelled good. So it was, as well as a nail varnish, it was a perfume. And straight away the big boss was like, yeah, that's new, that's fresh, I want it. So that's how they end up with some classic products as well as some very unique products. Anyway, let's go and take a look at Carnaby Street. So Carnaby Street, it's always one of the iconic streets if you want to see the Christmas lights. Not only the Christmas lights, actually, any decoration, whether it's Easter or Jubilees, they always have the best decorations. So that's why I wanted to do this tour. So a lot of you have seen this tour before, of course. It used to be called Plague, Cholera and Window Shopping, but today it's Plague, Cholera and Christmas lights. Sorry, somebody tried to scare me here. So yeah, it might be a bit busy. I hope it's not too busy and we get a good signal, but there we go. So Carnaby, it's named after Carnaby House, actually. That was the first building that was built on the house in the 1700s. It used to be spelled with a K, actually, at the time. Anyway, beautiful lights. They always have the most original. So this one is called Carnaby Universe, and it is meant to look like a solar system, really. So that's quite cool. You've been in Santa's sleigh yesterday. Oh, it's the second time you come here with me, Matthew. Nice. So we've got the Shakespeare's Head pub here. It's a Green King, so it is a chain. It's a fairly decent pub. And if you see up there, you see Shakespeare's is actually looking at us through the window. How long are the lights up for? Martina, I don't know if you mean daily or usually they're being turned off. 8 of, no, not usually actually, I know. It's 8 in the morning of the 8th of January. But they are turned off after midnight, or at least that's what they say. I've not been here after midnight, but it's meant to be turned off as well in the middle of the night. And today it's of course super clean, super bright and beautiful. But tonight we're here to talk about plague and cholera. So we'll have to jump back 200 years. At the beginning of the 19th century, really, London was, well, it was the beginning of urbanization as we know it today, but you also still had a lot of animals. So people lived all cramped together with humans, but also with cows and pigs and chicken. Karl Marx used to live around here. He had some chickens. He lived in a top flat. And of course, it was before the sewage system. So the streets were absolutely disgusting, with human waste, animal waste. And we had some very dirty jobs as well, because, you know, they had those cesspits that they had to empty. So that was somebody's job. He was called the night soilman. His job was to come and empty those cesspits. And it was not only a smelly job, but also a dangerous job, because you could slip and fall and drown. You could literally drown in the cesspit. That's a shitty way to die, quite literally. We had a case of Roger the Racker that died exactly like that in the 1400s. And those streets were disgusting. And we also had some interesting street food in the 19th century. Have you ever heard of a penny lick? A penny lick, it's, well, you might be able to guess from the name. It's something you'd lick for a penny. It's those tiny little coupettes that would have been filled by ice cream, by street vendors. So a little tiny portion of ice cream. You'd pay a penny for it, you'd lick it, and then you'd give it back to the vendor. And they were not washed or anything. They didn't have running water anyway, so sometimes they would maybe rinse them if you were lucky, otherwise straight to the next customer. And would you believe those were not actually illegal until 1896? So, you know, that was the perfect ground really for an epidemic. And we had, of course, well, cholera, we'll talk about that in a little while, but we also had typhus, scarlatina. So, you know, that was an interesting time. And I think if we could go back in time, you know, that street would have already been here and stuff, but really what would shock us the most would be the smells. I don't think our noses could bear the smells of the time. Let me turn around so you get another view of Carnaby Street before we move on. Hi, Kathy. Nice to see so many of you here. Welcome. So yeah, it's always the best location for interesting displays of lights, because very often it's not very Christmassy. It's always very original here. Anyway, let's go and see Casanova. So this street here is Broadwick Street today, but it used to be called Broad Street. The lady that's Shaida walking, she just walks and walks. She's from an artist called Julian Hoppe. And if I show you up there, this is a mural called The Spirit of Soho. It's from 91, and it's, let me try to show you the top. It's basically a lady that opens her dress, because Soho is all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, really. And you've got about 105 local people represented. So we won't go through all of them. So I was laughing because the kids behind me found it very funny, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So the gentleman with the glasses there, that's the guy that invented the TV, John Braid, I think his name was. And if you look at the clock, the guy with the yellow jacket, this is Mozart. The gentleman with the book that says DK, this is Karl Marx, that also lived here. And the gentleman in the red with the lady in the blue, this is Casanova and his mistress Teresa. Casanova, interesting gentleman. In his memoir, he claims that he had made love to over 130 women. Well, not all of them were women. We tend to forget, but there were actually a few men as well in his conquest. And some of them were courtesans anyway. And Teresa, I believe it's this Teresa that's represented here. She also has an interesting story. Teresa, she was what they called at the time a castrado. A castrado were those opera singers that would have their balls removed. so their voice wouldn't change, so they would still have a very high pitched voice. And Casanova was fascinated by this castrado, and he believed it was not a man, he believed it was a lady, so he actually seduced her, or him, and he realized it was indeed a lady. She had been disguising as a man to get some of those jobs, and she actually she moved into London to become a performer here as well. So I think it's castrato. Well, castrati would be plural, I guess, Linda, because in Italian the plural is a I. But yeah. Anyway, time to talk about cholera, because this street today is known as Broadwick Street. Often when something terrible happens somewhere, they change the name of the street. So it used to be known as Broad Street. And in the 1850s, we had a terrible cholera outbreak here. Out of 39 houses, 36 were contaminated with cholera. Now, cholera was a very quick disease. You could be fine at breakfast, dead at night. It was that quick. It would start with a little rumbling in your stomach, like bubbles, and then you'd have diarrhea, vomiting, and you knew you were on your last leg when you started to have rice water stools. I don't know whether I need to explain that one, but when literally you started to poop out water with little debris, white debris that looked like rice, then you knew you were nearly dead. Some people survived, but yeah, very quick disease. And there was, at the time, they had what they called the miasma theory. People believed that the disease, they were transmitted by a secret vector, the smells. And that's why, we'll talk about the plague later on, but when you see the plague doctors, they have those long beaks. That's actually full of herbs like rosemary, because they were trying to cover the smells. And we had a younger, well, today we would call him an epidemiologist, but that's actually an anachronic term. We had a younger physician here called Jon Snow. Not the Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. Jon Snow was just a physician from York. And he was convinced that cholera was waterborne, that it was not transmitted by the smells. To be fair, they already had a few clues that disease were not transmitted by the smells, because, for example, the night soulman, the guy that was emptying the cesspit, that was a very smelly job. So technically, he should have been the first case to contact cholera. Not the case. 01 Red, we are in London, we are in Soho. And a good epidemiologist today, it is someone that not only checks the cases, but also checks the oddities, the exceptions. And Jon Snow was really good at that. Yes, exactly. He's in Brompton Cemetery. We've actually seen his grave when we did a tour there last April, I think it was. And Snow, he went and knocked at every door, especially the people that were contaminated, to ask where they took their water from, because we didn't have running water in the homes at the time. And especially went to see the people that were not contaminated. And across the street here, there used to be a brewery called the Lion Brewery. At the brewery, through the staff, there was no cases of cholera. So he asked them, where do you get your drinking water from? They said, we don't drink water. We are we have free beer. Why would we drink water? Tracy, yeah, we'll get to that later on. And then he went to the workhouse. The workhouses, we have spoken about them in my tours before. They were those accommodations for the very poor. The local workhouse, there was no cases of cholera either. So he asked them, where do you get your drinking water from? They said, we have our own pump. There were also the case of a few schoolboys that were not from Soho. that caught cholera. And it turned up that those boys, they were on their way home collecting water from the little well, the little pump straight ahead. We'll go and get closer. On their way home. So they would drink the water from here on their way home. There was also a lady from Highgate that died, an older lady. And that was slightly unusual because Highgate is known to have very good waters because that's where the water comes from, actually, the source. And the lady was dead, but he went to see the family. And he asked, where did she get her water from? Because that's quite unusual. And the family said she used to live in Soho. And she was quite fond of the taste of the water from this very pump in the middle of your screen now. At the time, people had a favorite pump because all the water would taste slightly different, you know. So Snow was convinced that it was this very pump that transmitted the bacteria. And well, they didn't know quite yet about bacteria, but he convinced the sanity board to remove the handle so people could not grab water from here. Guess what? That stopped the epidemic. It completely stopped it. So he had pretty much proven that cholera was indeed waterborne. But would you believe people didn't believe him? It took another few years before that was fully admitted. Some very influential people actually believed in the miasma theory, including Florence Nightingale, the famous nurse. So today John Snow has a pub named after him. He probably would have found it quite unacceptable because John Snow was a teetotaler. He never actually drank any alcohol. The pub itself used to be called the Newcastle upon Tyne, which is quite ironic, really, because although we believe that cholera started in India, but it came into the UK through the port of Newcastle. Well, Gateshead to be precise. And Snow himself, he had actually studied cholera in a little village outside of Newcastle called Killingworth. That's actually a good name for a village with an epidemic. But yeah, and he was from York originally, and he walked down all the way from York to come and study at the Ontarian School of Medicine here in London. And he was a great doctor, not only with epidemics, but he also experimented with chloroform anesthetics. Before that, anesthetics were just a shot of whiskey, really. Well, Queen Victoria used to take a bit of cocaine sometimes, or cannabis oil when she was on her periods, but that was it, you know. And Queen Victoria, you might know, she had quite a few children, 9 I think in total. So she was quite often giving birth. And actually John Snow experimented with her with chloroform. So yeah, interesting doctor. And let's go a bit further. So we'll talk about the plague. It's still fairly busy tonight. So it's nearly 11 p.m. But you know, those few nights before Christmas, people do some late Christmas shopping and then they go to the pub. Hi Jody, welcome. There's a cute little pub here called the Old Coffee House. The coffee houses, they have evolved. In the 1600s, they were places for men to drink coffee only and philosophize about the world. In the 18th century, they were drinking places with alcohol as well, and a lot of brothels over the place. This one is from 1772. Well, this building now, it's actually Victorian, but the original pub is from 1772. And in the 19th century, the coffee houses, they were more food for the poor. So they were places with no alcohol and warm, cheap meals for the people especially the people that did not have a kitchen at home. You know, very sadly, in Victorian London, a lot of families lived all cramped together in a tiny room, and they couldn't really cook hot food. Anyway, let's talk about the plague. So let's jump back another 200 years before that. We had many different epidemics of plague. For tonight, although they were dealt with quite similarly, but for tonight, let's jump back into the one from 1665. The plague was much, in terms of losing your life, it was really not as quick as cholera. It would take a while to kill you. And when the plague came, they knew that it was coming, because at the time they used to publish the bills of mortality. Every single parish had that little publication. You could buy it for a penny, or they put it by the church. So when you saw in Covent Garden the first case, plague, you knew it was going to come to your parish as well eventually. When the plague came, what they first did is they closed the pubs, so quite similar to what we did with COVID. And then, they made a very sad and major mistake. They killed 80,000 cats and 40,000 dogs. They didn't know how the disease was transmitted at the time, and sadly, they thought the animals could be responsible. So not only it's extremely sad for the animals, but on top of that, it was a great mistake, because we know now, or we think we know, that the plague was transmitted by the fleas on the rats. So of course the cats and dogs, they could have helped getting rid of the rats. So that was a terrible mistake. And this is a radio station here. The British audience, you might recognize quite a few of the stations, so Scala, Magic, Kiss, Absolute, Planet Rock. When you record a radio show, you need a very clear background. You don't want any background noises, right? Well, apparently here, it is said that sometimes in the recording studios, they have some background noises, some like kids' voice, like kids mourning. Well, some believe that it might be the kids that have been buried across the street. Golden Square here is a plague pit. So the plague pits, they were those improvised burial grounds created for the plague, when so many people died so quickly that they could not, the cemeteries or the graveyards could not cope, so they had to improvise new graveyards. So when the plague came into a house, like let's say you had a family, daddy and his 5 children and mommy, if the daddy started to show signs, bobos under his arm, or any symptoms of the plague, they would lock the family all together into one room. So for the people that were healthy, they were pretty much signing their death warrant, They would put a red cross on the door, and they were not allowed out. A parish constable was hired to check the street. The parish would bring them food, and every week or so you'd have some carts coming down the street shouting, "Bring out your dead, bring out your dead." So you'd have to give them your dead loved ones. So that's very sad, because sometimes they were not able to come to the funeral, of course, and they were not always aware of where they had been buried. In the movies, sometimes you see they dump those bodies in those big pits, and that is not true. They were all buried together, yes, but they were still given they were still put on their back facing the sky. They were still taken care of as much as they could possibly do. They had to make it quick, and often those plague pits have not been built upon, because even centuries later, people were scared of laying the foundations of a building and maybe catching the plague again. So that's why when you see a little piece of green in London, a little square, often it used to be a plague pit. And today the plague, so we think we know that it was the bacteria Yersinia pestis that was transmitted by the fleas, but it's actually still debatable today, would you believe? Some people some people think that it might have been a virus because of the spread of the contamination. They have exhumed some bodies from those plague pits, and they did find traces sometimes of the plague bacteria, Yersinia pestis. But people are still debating today whether it was definitely the case. And this plague pit here was not only a plague pit, it was also a pest house. The pest house, pest like pestilence, it's French for the plague, they were accommodation for isolation. Sadly, we didn't have many of them in London. There were only 5. They were much more popular on the continent. And we know now that it probably would have been a better solution because the person that was sick was isolated here. So you had at the time here 36 little cottages. We don't really know how they were financed and everything. We don't have much record of how it worked. But yeah, we do know that they had some kind of an isolating center here. And anyway, let's go a bit further down here. And yeah, some of you mentioned it in the chat already about the plague. We have a little nursery rhyme that very, very well could be about the plague. It's still debatable, but yeah, some of you might have heard it. It goes, ring a roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. Some historians believe that when they say the roses, they refer to the red blotches on the skin from the plague. When they say the posies, they might refer to those sweet-smelling flowers that they placed in their pockets to cover the bad smell, for the miasma. When they say a tissue, they refer to the sneezing, of the pneumonic plague. And when they say we all fall down, well, we all dying. So that's what some historians believe, but I have to say it's not a fact. Some historians believe it's just nonsense. And the smells, though, they were very much they really believed it was the smells. Let me show you the plague doctors. So that's what we call a plague doctor. They were not doctors. The doctors were sharp enough to leave the city. The doctors and the clergy, they actually left London. They didn't stay. They knew that staying was pretty much catching it. So those guys were not actually doctors, but those uniforms probably helped, because they had a long waxy rope, so the fleas couldn't reach them. And they had those very long beaks, because the beaks were full of rosemary. The price of rosemary actually rocketed up through the plague, because they were trying to move the smell. And the smoking was very much encouraged as well. Down here it goes straight to Piccadilly, but we'll go straight ahead to take a quick look at Regent Street. Regent Street has been madness in the last few weeks. That's why I scheduled the tour so late, so it's not going to be too busy. But because of course you have all those amazing Christmas lights and those shops, I had to come here on a private tour last Saturday, 5 p.m. because I had a customer that wanted to see in Hamleys, the toy shop, there's a teddy bear factory. It's called Build a Bear. So you choose the skin, the color, you choose the clothing, and they do the stuffing in front of you. So my customer wanted to go there, but it was madness, and there was more than an hour of queue to make a bear. So at this time of the night, it's nicer. They've already turned off the angel. Oh yeah, it's 11:04, so the angel is already turned off. The Carnaby Street ones, it's midnight, but the angels are a little bit earlier. That's saving energy, Hi, Nick. So Regent Street, let me turn around so you get a beautiful view. We've seen it last week in my Christmas light tour, but it is named after the Prince Regent. So that's That was the son of George III. You might know. Oh, you've got a builder there. Oh, cool. Yeah, George III is known for losing the American colonies and also losing his mind. He got diagnosed with some very strong mental health issues. And his son, he had to take over the power while his dad was locked in Kew Palace. And the regent, with his favorite architect, John Nash, he redesigned a lot of London, like the Regent's Canal, Regent Street, a lot of Buckingham Palace as well. And originally on this part of the street, there used to be some canopies, some shelters. And the thing with the public shelters, it's that they always attract the wrong crowds. They'll attract the pickpockets, the sex workers. That's what happened on the Tower Bridge. That's what happened in the Brunel Tunnel. So very often they have to get rid of them. So they actually removed the canopies. Let me cross. It's a wedding dress. I missed something, I think. And I'll show you the big screens. So in the middle there, this is the, people call it the Eros fountain. It's not actually Eros, it is Anteros. He has inspired a little logo. I'll show you. If you know the newspaper, the Evening Standard, there it is. So it's little Anteros that we see on the fountain. So this is the Shaftesbury Memorial. Shaftesbury was a lord at Parliament, and he was trying to avoid child labour. In Victorian times, kids worked a lot, very difficult jobs, sometimes dangerous as well, like going into a chimney to clean it. And Lord Shaftesbury was trying to avoid that, or at least reduce the number of hours the kids could work. So, lovely gentleman. Originally, the monument was facing the other way. It was facing Shaftesbury Avenue down there, but they've removed it to clean it and they put it back the wrong way around. So we are on Piccadilly Circus, and let me show you the famous big screens, probably some of the most expensive advertising in London. And let's cross over, so let's go on Piccadilly, the street. So Piccadilly, it is named after Piccadilles. The Piccadilles, they were those neck collars that they used to have. Let me show you what they looked like. So this is a Piccadilly. It was also known as an underpropper or a supportas. And there was a gentleman here called Roger Baker that made beautiful Piccadilles, and he had a house here that was known as Piccadilly Hall. And over the years it became Piccadilly. And circus, it's of course Latin, so Piccadilly Circus, because it used to be a roundabout. It's no longer the case. And let me show you here, we've got a little police telephone box. So that's quite cool to still have it here. So those little telephone boxes, they were for the police officers on patrol, as well as members of the public. If you spotted something on the street, you'd open this, you'd have a phone inside that could ring the police station. The police station here was not far. We're actually heading to Vine Street now, so you'll see the site of what was once one of the largest police stations in the world. It's no longer here. Some of you might have been there because we've covered it on my Monopoly tours. You've dressed up as Cleopatra. Oh, makes sense. I thought you meant Queen Elizabeth. I would like to see you dressed up as Cleopatra. So district Piccadilly. It's also on the Monopoly board. I cannot speak tonight. It's also on the Monopoly board. So one day we might have to come here as well to look at property prices. And that's the Dilly, the hotel. It used to be the St. James's Hall, where the Dilly stands today. That's where Charles Dickens did one of his last lectures at St. James's Hall. Today it's quite a fancy hotel. We have a lot of fancy hotels in London. So sometimes I come here to pick up some customers for private tours. Oops, thank you. And so Vine Street, you'll see, it's probably one of the most obscure streets on the Monopoly board. It is tiny. I think it's, if I remember right, it's 70 feet. So it's very small. They put it on the Monopoly board because they have, it is linked to the law enforcement. You have Marlborough Street, which is great. Marlborough Street, actually. Bow Street. We should go to Bow Street next week. I've not scheduled it yet, but we should go and see that. And Vine Street, because of the former police station. So the station today, it's no longer here, but it was a very busy station. That's where the Marquis of Queensberry, you know, the gentleman that accused Oscar Wilde of being a sodomite, he was actually taken to the police station here for a while. So there were quite a few famous cases that came here. So the station would have stood here, and guess what? It is, or it was, haunted. At the beginning of the century, there's a police officer that sadly one night, we don't know why, he grabbed his belt and he managed to hang himself with his belt at the back of a door. And since that day, people have claimed that they've seen the ghost of a gentleman dressed up as an old-style police officer. Already at the time when the station stood, but through the Second World War, this became the Alien Registry Office. Alien, when I say alien, I mean foreigners, not alien as people from Mars, because we don't actually register extraterrestrial people quite yet. But yeah, at the time, you know, after the First World War, you had to register yourself when you were an alien, a foreigner. So it became the Alien Registration Office, and at that time, we had a few sightings again. People that claim that they saw an old-style police officer roaming around the building. It's always interesting when quite a few people have the same sighting. You start to think, there must be something, you know. This is St. James of Piccadilly with the beautiful Christmas tree. It's from Christopher Wren's. As a tour guide, you know, it's very easy. When you're looking for the architect of a church, it is Christopher Wren's. You can always say Christopher Wren's. 99% of the time, it's right. No, not so much here. It's more in the city. In Westminster, not so much. But yeah. Anyway, we'll have to go through this skinny scaffolding tunnel. So might flip the camera on my face because I don't like to put the camera on people's face. Yeah, because, you know, we don't know if people want to be on YouTube, so I'll show you my face instead for the next 10 seconds. Oops. There we go. Skinny scaffolding tunnel over. And we are now in front of the beautiful Fortnum and Mason. Let me show you the gas lamps. So we've got very few of those amazing gas lamps still in Westminster. We used to have a few, but they've all been replaced lately. I don't know if on camera you can see the glow as well as I can, probably not, but it's quite amazing. So those are still running with gas today. You know, when you, yes, exactly, that's the Albany. So this used to be an accommodation for single bachelor gentlemen, you know, back in the days. A lot of politicians lived there at the time. Let me show you the other one. So that's amazing. You know, sadly, they've changed most of those lamps because officially it is for the planet, but apparently that's not true because the cost, the carbon footprint of changing them is actually worse than leaving them, but it's probably because of the risk of fires. But you know, when you think of London, you often imagine a tiny street with a bit of fog and some of those gas lamps. So I think it's a shame to remove them, but hey ho. Anyway, we are back at Fortnum and Mason. Some of you were with me last week. We've seen it already, but today I'll tell you about the ghost story linked to the shop. So for the ones that don't know, Fortnum and Mason, it's an amazing department store that has a lot of royal connections. The display, it's advance calendar. And it's got so many royal connections because it was created by William Fortnum and Hugh Mason. Fortnum was some kind of a valet. He worked for the Queen Anne. And Queen Anne had a habit of, every time they would start a new dinner or lunch or whatever it might be, they'll start new candles on the table. They did not want candles that were half burned. And William decided to ask the Queen if he could sell those candles. The Queen said, yes, sure. So he made a fortune. And with that fortune, he asked his landlord and friend, Hugh Mason, if he was up for opening a shop together. And since that day, the shop has had a long royal connection. And if you see the statue in the middle, some of you might recognize the style. See the statue just above the name here, Fortnum and Mason? This is from an artist called Lynn Chadwick. You might recognize it because we've seen a statue from her before in Canary Wharf. It was called Man and Lady on a bench. This one is King and Queen, so always not that original titles, but the statues are quite cool. Anyway, we have a little ghost story here. We had, some of you might remember her actually, there was a presenter and a journalist called Nancy Spain in the 60s. She's actually mainly remembered because she died in a car crash. She was a lesbian. She was a bit butchy, a bit mannish. Anyway, one day she was here in front of the shop. When she wanted to jump on a taxi, she had a meeting, and the taxi stopped, and there was a lady inside, an older lady with red hair, and that lady took forever to come out of the cab because she was looking for the perfect change to pay for her fare, and she was struggling to find the money. And Nancy had a meeting, and eventually she had enough. She paid for the lady, she paid for the fare, and she jumped in the cab. And apparently the taxi driver said to her as they were going down the street, "You shouldn't have done that. This is the old lady C. She could have bought you and I together." And Nancy didn't think much of it. The next day she went for lunch at her mum's, and her mother got out the newspaper that read, "The old lady C has died in a fire." The newspaper was dated 3 days earlier. So either they have seen a lookalike or they've seen a ghost in the taxi. Who knows? To be completely honest with you, I don't even know who was referred to as the old Lady C in the 60s. Because today when we talk about Lady C, we talk about Lady Colin Campbell. You might know her. She's an interesting character. She's a royal commentator. She was actually born, her gender was not quite clear at birth, so they had assigned her as a male because she was it was the strong sex at the time, and then she became a lady. So anyway, it's not her. She's very much still alive. So I don't know for sure who was the old lady C in the 60s. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Thank you very much for coming tonight, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If any of you wanted to leave me a little tip, I know you don't have the links in the chat because of the little bug we had at the beginning. So you should be able to find them on my YouTube description. If not, feel free to use the YouTube little $sign. That's also absolutely fine. So thank you very much in advance for those that are able to do so. And thank you, Julie. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks, Martina. Thanks, Tarek. If you want to see a bit more of me, well, it's not scheduled yet, but next week I'm taking you to Bow Street. And tomorrow I might go and do some filming in a location that you guys have been requesting for a while. I'm not gonna tell you in case it doesn't happen, but yeah, I might do a little video in the place you did want to see. It's probably the most requested location ever. When is the next one? So the next one that is actually scheduled is 6th of January. I'm taking you to the Alps. We'll do Christmas Epiphany cakes and missing cases by a lake. And I'm also taking you to Briançon. It's the highest fortified city in France. But that's in a couple of weeks. We should have more before that. It's just not scheduled yet. Oh yeah, and tomorrow night I've got a little video of the United Arab Emirates. It's not a long one, it's like 14 minutes, but I've scheduled a little premiere if you wanted to see that. Thank you, Tish, I forgot about that one. The Jack the Ripper Museum, no, it's not a museum, but it's actually an area that I don't have a great signal in, so I'll do a little video instead. It might take a while before I have time to edit it, but yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for coming today. If any of you was completely new to me, of course I hope you'll give me a little subscribe so you can see my next tours. I find that YouTube is not great at promoting those live. They're really good at promoting videos, but the lives not so much. So the best way you can be sure not to miss them is actually to subscribe and hit the bell if you want to know when I go live. Thank you, Supin64. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, David. And Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you have the best time through those holidays. I'm sure I'll see some of you next week and some of you even tomorrow night in the chat. And yeah, all the best for the holidays. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.